Down if you want.
Sorry. You carry on, mate. Just ignore me. Just work. One, two, one, two. Sorry, sink it up.
We're lining up at the bottom on the top. On this way.
So each beam's roughly about 14 tonnes in weight.
Okay.
So we're lifting and moving with the 70-tonne excavator from the front of the channel. There's 4 beams to install. As you can see, each of the beams has got probably 8 or 9 holes cast through.
Yeah.
And the idea of that is that once you install all the beams, we put a big through tie or a big bar through all of the units and tie all of the beams together. On top of that beam then we'll have a layer of surfacing, so we're putting granite sets through here,
Okay.
same as what we've got on the rest of the job. Each beam then is supported on both sides by the L units, which you can see have been cast together with a structural slab earlier on in this week.
Yeah.
I did put some photos in the
That's right, yeah.
on the VIP community page on Dawlish beach cams. And then each of the beams on top of it has got 2 holes cast into it. So you can see in front of us now on the precast units, you've got these sleeves
Yeah.
in the ground. These sleeves go all the way down to the base of the unit. So they're about 2.2, 2.3 metres in length. And once you've landed the beam, what we do is we connect a big bar or 57.5 mil dowel bar all the way down through the beams and through the unit to tie everything together. So basically, once you've put all the bars together and you've grouted everything in place, it acts as one kind of integral unit really. It's all joined together. So Dawlish water will pass underneath this then, and you'll be able to walk straight over the top of this to join from the Marine Parade side of the Stilling Basin over to the Coast Guard side of the Stilling Basin. So probably in about, like I mentioned in your last update, it was probably about 4 or 5 weeks, and probably about 2 or 3 weeks time now. Underneath here, you'll start to see Dawlish water flow, and we'll start getting the temporary channel that we've been using backfilled. So the plan is today to install the 4 beams, and then there's an edge beam to go on. And because we couldn't cast the edge beam and the base of the unit all as one, because of the weight of lifting it in, what we've ended up doing is to cast in the edge beam on its own, and then we've got a small concrete pour to do to stitch the edge beam to the rest of the units that we're installing. So the edge beam will tie in from the unit that you can see over there into the unit that you can see on the right hand side of us now. So it'll be curved on the top in a very similar sort of size and profile to that, and then you'll end up with one in situ concrete pour, so an on-site concrete pour to join the rest of the edge beams to that edge unit.
So when you do the footpath across the viaduct, is that going to be sections like this or built like the rest of the seawall?
The actual link bridge to join the 2 sections together, that's all done on site. The reason why we can't do it in precast is because to put it into perspective, the span between that pier and the sort of size and profile of the deck, you'd end up with a deck weight for each individual span of somewhere between 60 and 70 tonnes. Okay. And the sort of size and crane that you would need to put in Dawlish to lift that in wouldn't fit in there, because you've got obviously the golf place over there, you've got the river which runs through there, and trying to arrange all of the temporary works to fit that sort of size crane and that sort of size crane pad inside Dawlish there. You
Yeah.
didn't have enough available space.
So you're going to build it on site?
Yeah, so we're building it on site. So the plan is we're starting on Monday we're using a supplier called Bots. So Bots, they produce reinforced concrete beams and bridges, all that sort of stuff on site. So they erect something which is called false work, which is basically like a temporary staging system to hold the wet concrete and form the wet concrete while we're pouring everything. And then once the concrete's cured, you strip all the false work out of that there, and that's what leaves you with your spans then. So that's probably around about a 10 to 12 week programme from them starting on Monday for them to complete all the abutments, all the piers and all the bridge. And around that sort of time then, that would be when we're looking at finishing and opening this section of the promenade underneath here. So we're due to finish with all of the promenade works and the Stilling Basin works, the bridge works in this specific location around about middle of November, towards the end of November, the current programme is. That would be completing the surfacing, everything. The only thing which sticks out the back end of the programme then is the disabled access footbridge, which like I talked about in the last video update that we did. We're planning on putting the piles in a blockade in Christmas, and then we're planning on putting the rest of the structure in a blockade in March. So I did see a question on one of the videos about what are the timings for the blockades. So the first blockade over Christmas starts on Christmas Day at 0001 and it runs through until the 27th of December, 0400. So it's around about a 54-hour blockade in total, I think it is, or 52 hours, something like that.
I might be spending Christmas here then.
Yeah. You can come and have a turkey with me, to be honest with you. One of the lads is going to have to cook something because we all get a bit we all get a bit depressed being at work.
Yeah, I bet. I'll find someone to bring us some Christmas dinner down.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, the lads would love that. So the second blockade, that starts on Saturday the 18th of March at 04:45, and that runs through until Monday the 20th of March, 01:45.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much.
So another couple of questions that I've seen are regarding the crane and rigging times and that sort of stuff. So a 200-ton crane takes roughly 2 to 3 hours to rig, like I mentioned in the last talk. The 650-ton crane, that's not a 2 to 3 hour rig time, that's probably more 4 to 6 hour rig time. The riggings of the crane will be done prior to the possession, so basically when we start the possession, we're ready to go, ready to start lifting. But yeah, all of that sort of stuff, you know, like I mentioned, 2 to 3 hours for the 200-ton crane, 4 to 6 hours for the 650-ton crane. So the engineer that you can see over at the bottom, he's just checking the position, the height and the orientation of the beam just to make sure everything's all right. I don't know what Chomper's doing recording inside the hole there. What are you doing then?
Shit, we're not going to put my camera up the hole. It's quite cool.
A bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
I learned something, mate. Keep watching.
A bit of light at the end of the tunnel, I know.
Do random stuff with cameras, you know.
So the beam in terms of height, to me it looks pretty good. This side, everything lines up with the precast units that you've installed to the side, and you start to get an idea on the line and position. There is a fencing that gets bolted onto the top of this edge to obviously prevent people from falling into the river when you walk over there. So that'll be a very sort of similar stainless steel system to what we've used on the rest of the wall. Once the engineer's checked and confirmed the position and the height's all right, we'll then remove the lifting chains and then we'll start lifting in the next beam.
Right.
So another one of the questions that was asked was why don't we install separate poles for CCTV cameras, tannoys, lights, all that sort of stuff, the M&E that runs through the platform. So that was a question which we asked during the design phase of this, just because it would make the platform look less cluttered. But unfortunately, Network Rail have their own kind of standards for the maintenance and the use of the equipment. So basically what would happen is if you were to imagine, if you were to put a CCTV camera, a public announcement speaker, and the customer information screens on one pole, if one of those assets failed and you needed to change a light bulb or you needed to replace the CCTV, you'd end up having to take the whole column and all the systems out of use.
Makes sense.
So all of the systems are set up and all of the different assets are set up on different circuits. So if you needed to change a light bulb, you'd just turn off the circuit for just the lighting circuit.
So I'm guessing it'd be different people that maintain the different...
It is, yeah. So you like Telent would be the one would manage all the comm side of stuff, so the public announcement speakers, and the customer information screens, and then you would have an M&E contractor who would maintain all the lighting. GWR would sort out all the maintenance for that though, not Network Rail. Another question was regarding all the seating. There's plenty of seating to go in, so I think there's 11 sets of seats just up on top of the promenade before you even get down into Section A, and most of Section A will be one big communal seating area anyway, so there'll be plenty of seating around both of the areas and up on top of the wall. The reason why we've only put benches, and the reason why the planning's only asked for benches where you've got the granite sets as you walk down the rest of the promenade, is because that's kind of like the public viewing areas as you're walking along, and they didn't want to create one big public area all the way down just because of obviously the granite sets and things like that. So another question was regarding the cladding panels on the back of the platform, well, the stone slips that we're using to put on. Why don't we put them into a cladding panel and just stick them straight on? It's just the weight, the availability, and the lead of that stone. So we only got that stone on site 2 or 3 weeks ago. To get them fabricated into panels, one, it's very awkward because every stone's a different shape and size, so it would end up costing a lot of money, and it would also take a lot of time to do, which we haven't got in our programme. We haven't got programmed for currently. It's also the weight of putting them on as well. If you imagine, once you start putting 10 or 15 stones onto it, you then have to start going down to the forms of mechanical lifting. For us to put a mechanism of mechanical lifting on the platform during operational daytime, when you've got passengers using the platform, it makes it very difficult. So you end up taking a lot of space. You end up putting passengers the wrong side of the yellow line, and all these things are different. All these different sort of things are stuff that we've got to think of when we're planning these operations. So Marine Parade, if you remember that was done in cladding panels. So each panel was split into 9 individual pieces. All of the stones were stuck to like a GRP panel, and the panels were just drilled and fixed on, and then we did all the pointing. That was because that stone was a lot lighter than what we're using over here. So they were made into 30 or 40 kilo panels, so 2 men could lift the panel on. Whereas if we were to do that here, they'd end up at 60 kilos, and that's not really suitable for manual handling. Again, another one regarding the prefabricated panels on the platform. It's not actually cheaper to do it this way. It's a labour-intensive exercise, and it is very labour-intensive because of how randomised the stones are. You know, there's no set pattern to them. It's not like a flat pack. It's not like a pack from B&Q, and there's a set pattern to follow, and you add bits on and take bits off.
So they're all doing it on the fly, are they? Motioning it as they go?
Yeah. And obviously they do have things. You do have things to also consider. Obviously the rain. You do still end up with some spray and some storm events over the top of the wall, where you've got the onshore winds pushing the spray over. And another question from Steam Train Maker was about the use of cranes from the platform and the track. So it's an option we did consider at tender, but a lot of the railway cranes have certain requirements for outriggers. So when the crane turns up, it deploys its outriggers, and generally you need about 2.5 to 3 metres either side of the line for it to deploy its outriggers. Obviously working on top of the bridge, you don't get that on this side because you're pretty much on the seaward side, and you don't get it on the other side because you've got Dawlish town and a big gap over there. So most of this precast we wouldn't have been able to install with a crane from this bridge. Also, when you're doing a temporary works design to use cranes on top of structures, especially on bridges, and if you're deploying outriggers, you're basically transferring the whole load of that crane, which is moving on, 14 to 16 wheels on the line, onto 4 outriggers. So you end up with point loading a structure, and that's where you end up with deflection in beams, structures potentially failing, and you probably wouldn't even get it past a temporary works designer. Another question was, any chance once the operations are finished that some of the spoil could be removed from the beach and sold elsewhere to the industry? Unfortunately, part of the MMO conditions is that we can't dig material off the beach. So the MMO is the Marine Maritime Organisation. Before we start any work, we have to do an application to them to allow us to move onto the beach and work on the beach. And what we wouldn't want to do is reduce the sand and the profile of the beach in this area and expose the rock which is currently protecting the foundations and the wall, because you end up with the beach and the rock eroding much quicker because the sand actually protects it. It's almost like a natural defence, really. And you'd end up with less of a publicly accessible bridge once we finished as well. Beach, not bridge, once we finished. So I can see you've answered some of the questions already regarding the gap on the platform where the 1L unit's missing. Like you've already mentioned, that's just where we pump concrete underneath the track. That will be filled in, and that void will be that void will have an L unit once we've completed all of the concrete works in this section. When do you think the C will be completed and ready to open to public? I did touch on that down there earlier. So the plan is all of this section in front of us to be completed middle towards the end of November, including the link bridge which joins the two phases together, and then the publicly accessible footbridge over the station. That's planned to be completed. Most of the structure installed throughout March blockade, and then it'll just be things like completing the surfacing and tying everything back in together.
So next summer they'll be able to walk the whole length?
Yeah. So another question was regarding the Brook alignment and when we plan on putting this back into its original position. It should be in its original position by the end of this month. And then we'll start filling the temporary channel which we've been using. So yeah, it should be done before we go back into autumn. So I did touch on it in the last video tour, but the facings and the reason why we're using pink Portuguese granite is because it's a council or a planning request. Yeah. So we offer different products from all around the world, different kind of stones, different kind of cladding units which go on the back of the panels, different imprints which go onto the concrete, so the textures and things like that. And all of these are selected by the local authority and the planning officers. And you have to get the planning conditions discharged before you start any of the work. So some of the stone that we selected was UK supplied, but unfortunately, like I say, it's just down to the planning officer and what they want. We don't really have any control over that. Yeah, we'll have a look. So on the right hand side here now, this is the Marine Parade interface that we started with. So you can see where the guys have put the concrete in, that's called a layer of blinding, so we regulate everything to allow us to fix the reinforcement cage onto the right level so you've got the right cover around the faces. So there's 9 piles that you can see in that reinforcement cage there, and the 6 piles that you can see in front of us here. This forms the pile cap which will support the new abutment. So that's the reason why it's slightly deeper, because there's more steel and more concrete and more mass required in this specific area.
So those that walked along King's Walk before, this is where those temporary steps came down, wasn't they, from the end of the promenade?
Yeah, that's it. And then when this is built up now, on top of that steel that you can see over there, on top of that pile cap, we've got some concrete blocks to install with a recurve unit on the top, and then you'll be walking back over the link bridge back over into Coast Guard side of the job.
Okay. Yeah, so when people are saying, why can't we walk around this way, this is why. This was the walking section a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and you can see the scar on the floor here this is where we diverted the sewerage pipe. So the old sewerage pipe used to basically run straight through where those piles are and that foundation is. That was what was stopping us putting the piles in. Okay. Now it runs underneath where we're stood. There's a manhole underneath the plate that you can see there, and then that manhole feeds into the manhole over there. So we've just diverted it around our works. Okay. And then all of this will get excavated out and concreted back in. So
that's all extra work that you weren't expecting to have, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's not the work that takes the time and stuff like that. It's getting the permits and the consents. All the legal documentation has to follow as well. So you end up having to employ solicitors, and so yeah, they're just getting ready for the second beam now. So engineers check the position and the height of that. He's happy with that. And I'll start installing the next one now. So while they're undertaking the operation, they have an exclusion zone in place, or a restricted zone, so no one can come over the bridge while he's lifting, just to prevent anybody obviously coming into contact with the beam while it's being lifted.
Okay.
Chomper, which is our slinger signaller there, he's in a two-way communication with the machine driver, telling them where and how to move it. So he tells them whether to put the arm out, whether to lower it, the arm down.
Yeah, I saw him just guiding him backwards there, so he didn't hit the beams at the back.
Yeah.
In, boys, coming your way. Be aware.
Down that fucking same run. In a bit more, yeah.
Had they fixed last week, so there's no rush.
Stay where we're about a foot off, yeah? Foot and a half, 18 inches.
So they're just going to drop this beam down first, a little shy of where it needs to go, just because they want to slightly adjust the first when they put in. They want to just double check the level on the top, where it ties into the L units over there, just because we're a little touch low. So they're going to pack up the one end, so the top of it's level, and then when this gets surfaced over, we won't see anything underneath them.
Okay.
Should be alright.
It's narrow, it's just like that.
Drop it.
Tracking back,
Drop. Drop it.
tracking back.
Drop. level, that's all.
The next one, I'll short that one day. Yeah, get it done and that's what we